There's a topic that has been coming up a lot, and that is how to communicate and deal with clients in terms of the dreaded C word, corrections. I think all of us have to face corrections or versioning or comments or whatever the client cares to call it. But the reality is, where do you draw the line? How many versions or corrections are too many? And how do you know when you've gotten to the point where maybe you're not the best person for the job? Of course, the answer to this is kind of like the answer to so many other questions in our careers as composers and creative people, and that is, it depends. Because it all depends on your journey and where you are as a composer, as well as where you are in your relationship with this particular client. And the only thing I can really do is the only thing that any of us can do, and that's to relay our personal experience and hope that maybe it can help people who haven't been through the ringer quite as much as we have. So I worked in ad agency stuff for 5 years back in the late 90s. And ad agencies are essentially correction city. The biggest issue with an ad agency, and I haven't worked with one in a long time, but the biggest issue is your client, let's say Honda, for example, someone I'm working for, in the late 90s with an ad agency, Honda is making the decisions on the music. The ad agency is actually steering the creative course. So I don't have a direct line of communication to the person who is ultimately making the decision and approving the music. And this proves to be a very frustrating position to be in. And I did my bit with ad agencies. I mean, I did like music for the Army and Honda and Intel, Activision, all kinds of stuff, and had just tens upon tens, sometimes 50, 60 different versions of things. And the thing is, back then, you were on the hook to do all of these versions until they were happy. And then they take it to the client and the client would have corrections, or the client would say, this isn't what we said we wanted, or whatever. You're not part of that conversation. You're completely out of the loop. So you're basically just left to the whims of the creative director for the ad agency, spilling out revision after revision after revision. But I was in it for the long haul. I wanted the gig, and I should stress that I did not have the job. The ad agency probably had at least 2 other composers or music houses working on the exact same thing, and ultimately, whoever got the closest version that Honda, in this case, approved, they're the ones that got the job, and the other 2 or 3 music houses or composers were just told, thanks, we don't need it. And that's it. You were done after months and, 50, however many revisions. So I learned in a very brief amount of time how to have a really thick skin and to sort of work on version 1 like it's my baby and do everything that I thought I wanted to do, like emotionally supporting whatever the commercial was or the game is in this case nowadays, really tweak it and get it sounding exactly the way I wanted. And after that, if there are corrections or revisions, I sort of take my emotional brain off the plate, and I'm there for purely like aesthetic correction reasons governed by the client. And this is how I still deal with things nowadays. It's very non-emotional once I sort of have my first kind of hurrah in this is the music that I think would work really well for the situation. For me, fortunately, I think because of just being beaten down so much by the ad agencies early in my career, I was still in school when I started doing some of this stuff, working for another composer. I learned how important communication was from the beginning and to really, really listen to the client and try to put whatever my preconceptions or musical baggage might be aside and do what it is that they at least think that they want. Now, sometimes they don't know what they want, and then this is a whole other video about communication and dealing with clients. But I really do think that all of my just torturous process of doing ad after ad after ad, revision after revision after revision early in my career really did build me up to where I just don't have that nowadays most of the time. I don't even know, 200 something video games. I've been doing audio and music for more than 25 years now. And there are 3 projects that I, in one form or another, walked away from. And they were mostly due to just creative differences. Sometimes you're not the best composer for the project. And when that happens, if you're blessed enough to have other jobs or something else besides music to fall back on so you don't have to continue torturing yourself over all these revisions or complete rewrites or all the nightmares that I've been reading about or talking about with people, if you're in the position to walk away, and it's causing you stress and extreme duress, by all means do it. It doesn't mean that you've failed. It just means it's not the right fit. Not every composer can do every style of music for every client. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, and it's really important to acknowledge that. Now, if you were like me, working for the ad agency early in my career, maybe you're doing music for an indie game, or you've got a streaming show that has like no budget, but lots and lots of revisions. I have a bit of bad news for you. In my experience, the lower the budget, the less experience the people are that you're working with, and the more changes you're going to have. It's just inevitable as everyone sort of matures and grows up together in whatever industry we're talking about. Dealing with composers, speaking with them, articulating what you want about the music, that's something that comes over time. And you can't expect someone who's maybe your age, if you're 20-something and starting out in your career, you can't expect another person your age to be able to communicate with you the way you understand music, or for you to be able to communicate with them the way they think they understand music. There's a lot of disconnects there, and it's not really anyone's fault. It's just a matter of who happens to be in the right place at the right time, and if it works or not. Now, what I try to do when I'm first on a job is talk with the client, the audio director, the producer, the creative director, whoever it is that I'm liaising with about the music. Talk with them as much as possible. Get to know them as a person. Get to know what kind of music they like. Get to know what their family's like. Get to know what their creative history is. Maybe you end up talking about bands or soundtracks or films. Just get a vibe for the kinds of things that they like, their taste, right? The things that turn them on, the things that turn them off. Even if it's going to have no direct influence on the job that you're working on, it really is, because everyone has that musical baggage. And it's a matter of how you deal with it, either up front, or if you don't deal with it up front, you're going to deal with it in the long run because it's going to come back and haunt you. So for me, it's all about establishing that language, establishing that communication, and most importantly, establishing that trust between the two of you so that it's more of a two-way conversation and not one person listening to music and going, that's not right, it needs to be faster, or some very vague, non-helpful kind of criticism. So if I were early in my career and really hungry, and maybe this was the only job I had, I would probably hang in there as long as it was physically and mentally possible for me to hang in there and just put my head down and do the work and get the revisions out and get it until they're happy. And then sort of chalk that up to growing pains and whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and then moving on to the next job. And in time, I found that it was pretty easy to almost immediately recognize if this new job was going to be one of those kinds of gigs that was revision after revision after revision versus one of those kinds of gigs that was, let's find the solution together, we're all working on this as a team and moving forward as a cohesive unit, as opposed to maybe one person picking something apart and another person picking something else apart and another person over here. Decision by committee is like lowest common denominator for creative results. It's just all there is to it. So I think the short answer is there's no easy way to deal with revisions. You have to choose yourself, but there is also no shame in walking away. Just make sure, if it comes to that it's an agreeable, friendly sort of agreement. It's not, you know what, forget it, I'm out. I think I've come to realize that maybe I'm not the best composer for this job. And more than likely, that's going to cause some backpedaling on the other side. Whoa, wait a minute. What do you mean? Because they've already invested a lot of time into getting the music to a certain place. And sometimes, I'm not saying use this as a bluff to make them reconsider things, but be prepared for them to possibly take a few steps back and kind of reconsider maybe the last 3 or 4 versions of music that you've sent, because it's all about that line of communication. One more insight. I was just over at my friend Alan's house. We were watching Dune, and he does music on the side. He's got a studio in his house, but he's retired. He does it for fun. And he charges a minimal amount per hour, and he's got a couple of clients that come to him like fairly regularly for things. And there was one particular song that the client was just like, I don't like it. No, not this. No, not that. And they kept changing things. And that's normally not the case with this client. And Alan's a very, very, very patient person, but he finally just sort of stopped, because I asked him about this on Monday. He stopped and he turned around and said, maybe I'm not the composer that you need on this particular song. And it wasn't out of anger or giving up. It was out of, maybe you just need to go find somebody else so that you can find what you want, because obviously my musical baggage isn't getting us there, and you need someone else to do something. And of course, that caused her to go, what? No. Okay, you know what? Let's take that last thing and let me listen to it again. And she sort of got like a new perspective. And sometimes that's all that clients need. So hang in there. We're all in this together, and we've all been there. Revision after revision, version after version. But in the end, I really do believe that it's the relationships that count, and that's what's going to pay off in the long run. And it's all about the long run.